Okay, here we are.
Here we
We're
are.
back. In the words of the greatest comic character of all time, Keith from The Office, it's the end of the financial year and spirits are in the sky. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a few tax arrangements to sort out myself before the first, but we'll get there.
Yep. And I'm about to jump on a plane
Yeah.
to France for the first time in a few years. So, new horizons, new adventures. Which leads neatly on to the subject of today's pod. We've got a few announcements to make.
We do. Yeah, I'm going to be taking a little bit of a step back from the last place on Earth. Basically, I've got a heap of other things happening, some other projects that I want to work on. I feel like, it's been a pretty interesting year and a bit. Fair bit that we've kind of learnt, I think, and discovered, which maybe we'll talk about in a little bit. But for now, I think I'm going to be taking a little bit of a step back. Might pop up here and then on the podcast, I imagine. We'll probably inevitably have things that we have a bee in our bonnet about and want to talk about and want to air. So that still may happen. But in terms of regular contributions...
what are you going to be doing instead? What's going to fill the void?
Well, I've got a 9 to 5 now, so that's going to fill some of the time at least, if not the void.
Yeah.
Big State, my TikTok channel and Instagram channel, the algorithmic gods have been smiling upon it as of late. So
strength to strength on the back of some really strong casino and court content of late.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to be experimenting more with short form video and the Big State worldview a little bit more. And then, just maybe some kind of longer form writing projects and maybe wanting to do things with a little bit more time to put into them rather than trying to kind of pump things out.
Whereas I'm heading in almost the opposite direction. So having spent most of the last year in NGO land and campaigning to take some skin off the government in various ways in more recent months, I'm strapping in and very keen to gear up to do a bit more of my own reporting, probably in a sort of a slightly shorter form than has sometimes been kind of my preferred medium in the past. But I think I'm kind of very keen to get stuck into keeping a close eye on the WA government, its role in the bigger picture, and to, I suppose, weave some pre-existing campaign interests and priorities through that, but with possibly a slightly more investigative edge than has been possible previously. I think there's a lot to get stuck into, but before that starts, I'm going to take some time off. As I say, it's been a pretty intense 6 months to start the year, and I'm keen to get away, see some family overseas, and have a bit of a think about kind of what the rest of this year might look like, including for Last Place on Earth. It's going to be a bit of a winter recess, I suppose. And on the flip side, you might be popping up as a guest from time to time, perhaps, but not sort of in the anchor chair in the same way that you've kind of been steering things through the last few months.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of, to me, feels like it's kind of a neat sort of dovetail in a way, like you have been carrying the bulk of the load for Last Place on Earth through the first bit of this year and probably kind of from the outset, really. It's just interesting to kind of to think about the different ways that you kind of come at the core issues, which I think are kind of still basically what we're working on kind of almost all the time anyway, are these key issues of how power operates and how one can kind of interface and interact and kind of extract concessions from the state and the lengths it'll go to try and stop that happening.
Yep.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel about the, like, well, I guess to go back to the start maybe, how do you reflect on kind of what made us want to start this project to begin with, and sort of how it's developed since then?
Yeah, I mean, from memory, I think we both kind of arrived at a similar vision, kind of independent to each other, which from my point of view, I think at the start, it was actually more about just like finding somewhere to like publish work, because I was just feeling a little bit frustrated that there were so few avenues in Australia to have anything published.
No magazine culture.
No magazine culture at all. Few websites will give you a couple of $100 a pop, but plenty of people trying to get in on that racket. And I guess as well, you know, given our backgrounds, sometimes I think it presented somewhat of a barrier as well, being associated with, you know, as activists or as kind of...
Yeah, I remember in particular around the time of the Four Corners episode, some criticism coming my way about the boundaries between activism and journalism, and the perceived need to maintain a distance between the two, which has never really been the way I see it, or the way I think I operate. And I think kind of this project has sort of functioned as a bit of a way to kind of to experiment with how you can kind of potentially run multiple streams through the same.
Yeah,
product.
and I think that's always been the line that we've kind of been considering. Where do we fall upon in terms of like, are we campaigning? Are we doing journalistic work or reporting of some kind?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, I mean, the obvious thing there is that like that line doesn't seem to be worth thinking about on the other side, you know? It's just like you can work for Seven West Media with all its vested interests, and you can still be seen as kind of independent, and you can be someone who's done PR work for mining companies, and you can still be seen as kind of independent journalistically. So
or you can be a state political reporter for the West Australian, and then immediately the next week be running media for a WA government cabinet minister or for you know, Woodside or Rio Tinto.
Yeah, or lobby groups or whatever. Yeah. So I guess that like kind of born of a bit of frustration with the media landscape, and also just born of like a sense that there was a gap in the market for people who are interested in politics and in news in Western Australia, who have almost zero options. I think when we first conceived it, it was kind of looking at like a younger audience, like a Gen Z, a millennial audience. Arguably, we haven't.
We've had our moments. We've managed to kind of corner a part of the zeitgeist at times.
Yeah, for sure.
When you attack the shibboleths, you kind of you tend to draw the Gen Z crowd.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one thing that it has reinforced this whole endeavour is that online culture and social media and algorithms love controversy. You know, that's as does media throughout all of history and time, I suppose. But
I think for me, the other kind of motivating factor originally was just this perception that I've spent most of my kind of recent career trying to get the rest of the country to pay attention to what's happening in WA, in particular certain aspects of it, the housing crisis for one part, what's happening on the Burrup as another big part of that, and a perception that the key issues that define our times are probably more prevalent and more amplified in Western Australia than anywhere else, but almost as a function of that, it's harder to get the rest of the country, the rest of the world to realise what's happening here, and conversely, or kind of maybe almost the same, the media that does exist in WA doesn't want to focus on that or talk about it either. It's it's almost too big, too close to focus in on. And I think it's been interesting to gauge the way that's shifted over the course of even just the 18 months or so that we've been doing this in various ways. I do think there's been a big shift, both in the role that WA plays politically, but also maybe more importantly even in the awareness of that role. And I feel like almost universally it's understood that Western Australia kind of has this very powerful influence over the political landscape in the country, and more the key issues here have swung into focus. I think we saw that through the work that you and I were involved in on Kate Hewlett's campaign, for instance, and kind of that sort of at a political level helped to sort of puncture this myth that WA is just this mining megalith, kind of like universally in favour of industry at all costs. And I think we've seen through kind of the way the media has told the story of the North West Shelf approval more recently, for instance,
Yeah.
no one's under any illusions now about what's happening in West Australia, or
Yeah.
more importantly, how much it matters. Like
Yeah.
we're being framed as, and you saw that with the nature positive laws,
Yes.
which we covered extensively as well through last year as well, and WA's role lobbying around that. I just think there've been kind of key threads. In some ways we were ahead of the curve, and in some ways we were kind of almost rendered increasingly obsolete by the fact that the mainstream media did begin to pick up the same threads that we've been kind of pulling on for quite a while.
Yeah, the underlying kind of hypothesis of the last place on earth from the start has kind of remained the same, and I think has been kind of borne out and proven to be true and
Vindicated.
increasingly
So job done as far as you're concerned. You can take your leave with no stone left unturned.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, whereas I'm still just here bashing my head against the brick wall. Kind of the caravan's moved on. I'm still trying to get people. Please, you've got to realise what's happening here.
Excuse me.
Everyone has. I don't know. I still think there is ground to turn, and there is territory that needs further examination.
I mean, I think there's a question remaining of it, like, how deep does it all go, and just how crooked is.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like the thing about WA has always been that it's almost like it's too big. It's too big to see. Like it's kind of it's in the water or whatever.
Yeah.
The corruption is so all pervasive that it's almost hard to kind of to pin it down and to pinpoint it. Whereas there've been some developments in the past few weeks, couple of months, on areas in areas that we've worked very closely on that have begun to kind of like shift that veil or kind of bring that into a bit sharper focus. And there've been big forces on both sides, kind of like grappling to kind of to steer that narrative in certain directions.
Yeah.
I think as the dust settles on all of this, there'll be kind of some longer pieces and work to be done, kind of unpicking what's transpired. There's been a lot going on, and talking primarily kind of around the sort of the approval process for the North West Shelf and all the politics that's accompanied that at a state and federal level, and internationally, of course, with the World Heritage process. So I think that's probably something I'll be kind of sticking with more through Last Place on Earth in the second part of this year, and seeing what further threads there might be to follow and rabbit holes to go down.
Yeah.
But I mean, how's it feel? Do you think have we achieved what we set out to do? In some ways, maybe so. In some ways, maybe less so.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think at the start the vision was to do kind of like longer form investigative work, which we never really had that much of a crack at, just because I think that work just takes time and energy and resources, and both of us like validly got caught up in other things. For sure. And I mean, mea culpa, like it's kind of, I think you've, as I said earlier, had to kind of bear the heavier load of that through much of this time, simply because like my engagement in campaigns has been sort of like very direct and all consuming, and conversely, you're kind of now stepping into roles where they're more, prominent and kind of and at the forefront. Whereas I've got more time to kind of pursue freelance avenues. Yeah, we're kind of having a bit of a switch around in a few senses.
Tag teaming,
But I mean, look, I think that, we didn't really do as much kind of in-depth journalistic work as perhaps we'd envisioned. But I think we did manage to, we've built an audience. It's not a huge audience, but it exists. And I actually do think that we've had a level of cut through in certain spheres and in certain, the West Australia kind of political and media class that surprised me.
Can you give any kind of like specific examples?
I mean, I think, word on the street is that some members of LEAN, the Labor Environmental Action Network, are avidly listening, and my conversations with some of those people, some of them more hostile, some of them less hostile, have led me to believe that might be the case. I mean, what that cuts through as, I'm not exactly sure.
And I mean, I think, again, more broadly, kind of, the blurry line that we've walked between campaigning and journalism, between production and, campaign production through the Fremantle election campaigns earlier this year. I think we sort of showed that the kind of storytelling that we've been doing here for a long time translated into a kind of a very direct, specific political landscape and narrative that that had, you know, a huge audience.
Yes.
And had very kind of sent a very clear message to people in power that there was sort of that they were being watched and scrutinised and observed.
Yeah, and cut through to a very broad demographic.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was, I mean, I think in some ways, like, the greatest achievement of Last Place on Earth has been a piece of Kate, the podcast that we produced for Kate Hewlett and with Kate Hewlett, which, I mean, in some ways was just like a more humorous, more engaging, better looking
they're just better at it than we are.
what we're doing.
Even the room, she lives in a nicer house than you. I mean, you know,
Exactly.
266 is great, but Kate's got a really fucking nice house.
Yeah, it just looked and felt and sounded better. But I mean, it was the guiding ethos was similar. Like, it was
And I think, you know, you can draw lines where you want. I think another kind of a bigger piece that I'll continue to work with into the back half of 2025 is the role of kind of production, not just for The Last Place on Earth, but kind of Last Place Productions as an enterprise that can kind of house a number of different platforms and voices that are all kind of telling different parts of the same broad story, which is the role of Western Australia and the things and forces that govern this place and the influence they have kind of more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's massive scope in Western Australia for political new media projects, like, you know, being the last place on earth where anything happens. It's the last place on earth where we've got, like, political influences. Like, they don't really exist in Western Australia, right? I mean, we've played around in that space. Kate has played in that space.
For sure.
But I think there's definitely possibilities there. And I mean, I think as well, it's been good, like, for us, we've provided a kind of voice in the landscape that is not, like, kind of caught up in some of the same old tropes and cliches of leftist politics. I think that's also been a kind of, in a small way, a bit of an achievement too.
And possibly more to come from you, you know, on that theme in other forums going forwards as well, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, you know, the whole Big State project is playing around in that space as well. But in some ways it's felt easier than this because that is, like, I'm playing a character there. Whereas this, it's balancing up all the different kind of roles and responsibilities and that we've both had at various points, and it's been a bit of a difficult balance at some points, but also it hasn't really. Like, we've kind of just...
No, but then again, I think it is, there's a kind of a added layer of delicacy where in a situation where you're playing yourself but still amplifying kind of, you know, some responses and reactions in order to, you know, to make the point in the sort of more exaggerated way that you have to, but still when the audience is, you know, to a large extent consisting of people you encounter in personal and professional settings. You know, sometimes you kind of you tread in a few toes. And maybe people sort of take things personally when they're not meant personally. They're just kind of, you know, sometimes I'm just a cunt, and I just say...
For rhetorical purposes.
Precisely. So, I mean, you can... I think you just have to accept that you're going to, you know, you're going to, piss a few people off, and sometimes they're both friends and foes, you know, alike.
Should we just run through some of the... We don't want to dox anyone, but just some of the second parts of the email addresses that subscribe to The Last Place on Earth. Is that a?
I mean, sure. You're the one who's got the listserv.
I think we've got an at News Corp, whatever their thing is. We've got an at Seven West. We've got an at The Guardian. We've got a couple of at the ABCs. We've got a couple of at wa.gov.au. Okay,
well, that's the one I'm interested in. Right.
So, I think, like, it doesn't take much in the small pond of Western Australia to make a few ripples. Like, you can literally set up an iPhone and clip on a couple of cameras and say whatever you want.
And obviously, you know, to labour the metaphor, like, there's some fucking big fish to fucking, like, to try and catch in the net as well. I'm not sure we've landed any of them completely, but we've kind of we've had a few on the hook at various times, I reckon, and reeled some in.
Yeah,
in,
could
in
still
various
be
ways.
some reeling to do, I reckon.
Yeah. I'm confident enough there is that I'm definitely kind of keen to spend a lot more of my time doing it through this platform. For the next few months at least. Having said which, I am going to go on winter break, by which I mean fuck off to Europe for a couple of weeks for both work and family reasons, and then a couple more weeks before I'm kind of back in the hot seat in South Freo. So I suppose, there'll be some adjustments to be made behind the scenes. Last Place on Earth. Probably nothing that anyone's going to notice anytime soon, but there's going to be a slight reduction in volume over the next few weeks. If people who are paid subscribers don't feel they're getting their money's worth, there's certainly going to be no hard feelings. If you just go back to getting the same full access you were before you started paying $5 a month, if you want to keep giving us $5 a month so we can pay for the space, that's gratefully received as well. But I'm pretty optimistic, and I've said this before, and it's not necessarily always been something I've delivered on. I'm pretty optimistic that there's a lot more to be said here, and I'm keen to kind of continue finding new ways to say it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more to mine, and I think that there's a chance to get working out the form and the format is difficult, and we're both logged into 100 Instagram accounts. It's just kind of working out what goes where is not necessarily easy.
I said to a court reporter outside court the other week, the only question is finding which platform. Actually, I didn't say that, but I said something pretty similar. None of them made the cut anyway. Except on our Instagram, one of them.
Which is where it really counts. So I think I'm looking forward to seeing where you take it. I think there's plenty of fertile territory to explore, both in terms of content and in terms of form. So and always plenty of room on the couch. Thank you. Obviously. I mean, you live basically next door. So. If you hear me recording, you can always just poke your head in. That's right. I could still have my 2 cents.
But no, I think all of these various different projects, platforms, voices, campaigns are kind of all dancing around the same subject matter. They're all kind of interacting and interwoven, and I'm sure they'll continue to be so, just by the very nature of so many stories and so few people who are willing to tell them. I think more to come. I'm feeling pretty good about it, and hopefully enough people are kind of still getting their money's worth or feel it's worth kind of opening the emails on a weekly basis. Anything else to reflect on before?
I think that's pretty much it. Have a good trip.
Will do.
And I'll stay tuned.
All right, well, I've got to figure out how to fucking edit this podcast before we can get it out there to make the announcement. So
and if people want to keep up to date with my stuff, I do have my own website where I have a very inactive newsletter of my own, which is when there's anything else going on, I'll post there. So I think it's jaredmazza.com. So if people want to subscribe there as well. And obviously everyone who's watching this will doubtless be seeing your Big State contribution pop up on a fairly regular basis. I can't imagine the algorithm can separate the two in any meaningful way. So you'll be seeing both of our faces and hearing our voices on all the Instagram channels that we currently have access to into the future, I'm sure. Cool. Very good. All right. Let's do this. Let's get this edit done. Let's do this tutorial.